Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the Hobby Collab, where today we're going to be painting up these new Kharadron Overlords models. I had a lot of fun with these. We're going to be painting these up in a tan and black weathered fashion, as you can see here. I just want to thank GW for sending this stuff over, and with that, let's get started. We're going to start with the tan surfaces, actually. And so I started with a primer here, a tan primer here. If you don't have access to this, that's fine. A gray, white, or black will do. But obviously, if you can get a tan primer, I used Rust-Oleum. That would be more ideal. So we're going to start with Morghast Bone. This is a Citadel base color. It's actually pretty close. And the reason I went with a tan primer is that, if you're painting this over black, it would probably take a lot more layers. So this just saves us some time and energy and pain. We're also going to be painting up this balloon pack. Anything you want to be tan, this is going to be the same process, but I'm not just limiting this to the dock. So yeah, any tan armor you want to paint up like this. So then we're going to move on to Citadel Ushabti Bone. This is barely a shade lighter, but what we're going to do with this is we're going to be doing some highlighting. I'm doing a zenithal method, that is, I'm spraying from directly above. That way I only hit the top facing surfaces. Now, because of the shape of the model, you're not going to be able to get every bit of the upward facing surfaces at a perfect 90-degree angle. So anywhere between 45 degrees, 90 degrees is fine. You just want to make sure you're not hitting the bottom or anything that would be shaded, right? Speaking of shade, we're going to go on to Citadel Skeleton Horde here, and we're going to be spraying this in the shadows. If you're not really sure where to place your shadows, your best bet is to do what's called an anti-zenithal or nadir. Just basically flip the model upside down and spray all that. That way you're hitting all the bottom-facing surfaces. Another thing you can do is, especially with shapes like this round balloon thing, is look at a reference like a shadowed ball or a balloon or something. But of course you can do stylistic choices like what I'm doing here with the dock. This is not how shadows work, right? But I thought that this looked cooler. You get this nice gradient where you've got the shadowed yellowy bottom going up to a nice tan at the top. Now we're going to move on to some chipping and weathering. I use Vallejo Dark Rust, but any dark brown will do. If you want to use Citadel Paints, Dryad Bark would be a good contender. Now what I've done is I've put this on a sponge and then I dabbed it off, and now I'm dabbing the model with the sponge. And what this does is it gives you these random patterns, which is something that's really hard to recreate by hand. People tend to want to make patterns, and even if it's not a conscious thing. As for where you want to focus this, you want to focus this on the hard edges of things. Anything that's more exposed, try to avoid putting too much of this brown on flat edges. That's not really where paint would chip off first. Now, after you've gotten those chips in place, what you're going to do is you're going to grab a brush and you're going to start connecting some of those random shapes together, right? So because of this, you're stamping with that sponge, that can also lead to repetitive shapes. So you want to connect those to try and break that up. Then what you're going to do is you're going to do a little bit of edge highlighting. You don't need to be neat with this, but you just think about like where would paint be chipped off, hard edges. So it's a good idea to give a little bit of edge highlighting. You don't have to do it everywhere, but I think it's a good basis if you're not familiar with chipping and weathering. You can also see that I'm adding in a couple of my own little scratches here. Again, you want to break up anything that would be uniform or repeated, marks. You want to give the appearance of randomness, so that means occasionally doing a little bit of freehand. All right, now we're going to move on to the black surfaces, these hard surfaces rather. And obviously, to start off with that, you're going to base coat anything that you want to be black with a black. Any black paint will do as long as it's like pure black. You don't want to use things like a Corvus black, which is kind of gray, right? So I use Vallejo Model Color Black. Abaddon Black would also be a good substitute. I know that Zach likes to use acrylic heavy body paints by Abtalung. So as long as it's a pure black, you're good. But then we're going to move on to Citadel Incubi Darkness. And we're going to spray from above. Again, kind of the Zenithal thing, but we're going to be a little more choosy, right? We're not going to be going for exactly realistic. This is not how light would interact exactly with a surface like this, right? What I'm doing is I'm focusing on the areas that are the most upward facing. So I hit the top of this balloon, and then I also hit the top of his chest there. Create a gradient where the top is this greenish blue incubi darkness, and the bottom shadowed areas are that pure black still. I'm going to be painting up these auto endrins, these little drone things, which are kind of cute, in the same manner, right? And of course, the Aether Khemist as well. So you can see I've done it on the Aether Khemist here, and if you notice, so look, looking top down, sorry, it's a little out of focus. You can see that it's blue, but then if you look at the bottom, it's black. So that means it's from the side, you get that nice blue on top, gradiating down? I guess I don't know if that's where down to black. Now we're going to use Citadel Incubi Darkness to 2 parts Deepkin Flesh. So 2 parts Incubi Darkness, 1 part Deepkin Flesh. And then within those areas that we painted Incubi Darkness, we're going to try and do a smaller highlight of this mix. You don't want to completely get rid of that previous layer of Incubi Darkness. This should be in much smaller proportion. Now you're going to do a 1-to-1 mix, and you're going to do a little bit of chipping edge highlighting. This means you're not going for you can see here I'm like kind of tapping the edges, right? This gives the impression of chipped, weathered, beaten up bits of armor. You know, these guys are Salvagers, so I don't imagine their armor is very pristine anyway. This is also an excuse to not have to be super concerned about having super neat lines, and you know, it gives you a chance to just, you know, emphasize the shapes of the model without too much stress, right? Because if you screw up, it's fine. As long as it looks random, you know, you're golden. You can say it was intentional, even if it wasn't. So that's where we want to be here on this black armor. Now we're gonna move on to the cloth and soft surfaces. Okay, so just a quick thing I should maybe note. You might notice that there's some washes done. We're gonna be covering that all later. But for now, let's focus on the clothes. This is Citadel Bransboynd. Again, the same color that we used on the tan surfaces. We want to have some uniformity and also just, you know, have to buy less paint. So we're gonna base coat their pants in that Bransboynd. Then we're gonna grab Citadel Skeleton Horde, which is another color we used for the tan armor. This time we're gonna thin it down though. I use Lamia Medium. You should probably technically use Contrast Medium, but I find Lamia Medium just goes a little smoother. What you're gonna do is you're gonna apply it to all of their pants. Then you're gonna return with Bransboynd, and you're gonna re-layer up that Bransboynd, leaving that Skeleton Horde in the shadows. This is your classic base wash highlight method. Bransboynd fancy here. And then, of course, an old favorite, they're back, Ushabti Bone. Within those previous layers of Bransboynd, we're going to highlight with Ushabti Bone. So this means you want to leave a little bit of that Bransboynd still showing through. You want to paint within those lines. Then we're going to go with a Citadel Corvus Black. This is a gray black. Remember I mentioned don't use a gray black because this is what we're going to use to highlight. Now, I've base coated their gloves and boots in a pure black. I think this was either Abaddon Black or Vallejo Black. Pure black, as I mentioned earlier. And what we're going to do is we're going to, in the same manner that we layered up those pants, we're just going to try to avoid the deepest shadows. We're going to leave those completely black and then layer up with this Corvus Black. You're also going to hit that Corvus Black on their bits of leather, webbing and stuff like that. Then we're going to grab a mix. We're going to create a mix. I don't have an exact ratio here, but you can see here, it's adding a little bit of Ushabti Bone into that Corvus Black. And there's a theme here. Within that previous layer of Corvus Black, we're going to layer up a little bit of this mixture. Again, making sure that you leave a fair amount of that Corvus Black, showing you want to paint within those lines and shapes. And then with this mixture, you're also going to do a little bit of scratchy edge highlighting on the areas that would have the most wear and tear. You know, these are soft leather boots, so, you know, unlike the pants, which would probably just tear, these are a little bit tougher, so they're going to have scratches look a little rough, similar to the armor. Something I don't cover in this video is how I did the skin and hair. It's because I'd like to do multiple skin tones and stuff, and I felt like that was probably just too much scope for this video. If there's anything you see here that you like, shout it out in the comments, and I'll try to put together a flesh and hair video for that specific thing. But for this video, I wanted to focus on that black and tan, stuff like that. Also, I probably should have said this way earlier in the video, but you're going to notice a lot of things are done out of order here. And the reason I did that was because I felt like it's easier to digest in these broken up manner as opposed to the actual manner in which I painted them, the exact order. Let's talk about the Aether Khemist now. He has this like rubber suit, and so we're going to use Vallejo Dark Gray, which is this like bluish medium gray, very cold. It's not a very warm gray. And then once that's dry, we're going to use Coelia Green Shade, which is like I guess it's kind of a weird turquoise color, actually. I'm going to thin this down, and we're going to apply this wash all over this. Sorry, I had to adjust my lighting here. We're going to apply this, and make sure you get that green shade in those like crinkly recesses. I don't know any other word other than crinkly to describe his rubber suit here. Then what you're going to do is you're going to return with that dark gray, and you're going to layer all these upward facing surfaces. Like you can see, I have this directly under a light, so you can see where the light bounces back up and where the shadow is darkest. So don't hit those areas that are dark, just the upward facing surfaces with this dark gray. Then we're going to go to Vallejo French Mirage Blue, which is like a light blue gray. And we're going to do some neat edge highlighting. This is not scratchy edge highlighting. Some neat edge highlighting to emphasize all these wrinkly, crinkly things. This is a different material than the leather, so we want to highlight it in a different manner. It's a good way to differentiate is your highlighting style. Then we're going to grab that Vallejo French Mirage Blue and add a little bit of Ushabti Bone. That's the lighter tan color. And we're just going to highlight these areas that are the sharpest points. So you see where it's like a three-way intersection of these wrinkles? We're just going to highlight those. Now we're going to move on to fire and smoke. There's actually quite a bit of this in this set of models. So we're going to start with Citadel Mephiston Red, which is a red that's got a little bit of orange in it. You could also just do a pure dark red, like corn red would be fine. This is a little bit brighter, so that's why I went with it. I'm going to be doing a combination of methods here. I did this by brush, but I'm also going to show you how to do it with airbrush. So once you have it base coated in Mephiston Red, you're going to grab a white ink, and you're going to, again, zenithal from directly above as best you can get. That way you're hitting all the top facing surfaces, and you get this nice, the round smoke is emphasized because you're only shooting from directly above. Then you're going to grab Dollar Roundy Brilliant Yellow, why can't I talk? And you're going to spray this over the top, let's say third to a quarter of the model, of the smoky bits. The reason I'm using inks is because they're transparent. That's also why I'm using this Citadel Gryph-hound Orange, because it's also transparent. That means you get to take advantage of that white pre-shade, and you get to blend nicely into these reds and yellows, right? So if this were a strong, very opaque color, then it would just look like a bunch of disparate colors. This yellow and orange blend nicely into that red because of the transparency. Same thing with this Citadel Contrast Ball Red, which is quickly becoming one of my favorites. You're now going to shoot this on the bottom third of the white, again blending back into that Mephiston Red, blending into that Gryph-hound Orange. I forgot to mention, you want to use that Gryph-hound Orange on maybe like the mid third, and you want to blend it up into that top third of that yellow. Now you're going to want to use Citadel Black Legion. You're just going to spray this towards the bottom. You can also do a little bit of anti-zenithal. Again, that's spraying from directly below. Be sparing with this. You don't want to overdo this black. Also, just to be clear, the reason I used Dollar Roundy Yellow as opposed to a contrast ink is just because I didn't have a yellow contrast paint on hand. Now we're going to talk about the smoke. As I showed off there that there's a guy smoking a cool little pipe, and I wanted to show you how I did that. So you're going to paint the smoke in a French Mirage blue, returning back to some familiar paints. This style is going to be a little more cartoony. I'll also show you an alternate way soon. So French Mirage blue and dead white, you're going to make a 1-to-1 mix. And you're just going to emphasize these shapes. So this is going to look kind of cartoony, right? Very graphic, because we're just focusing on emphasizing the shapes. We're not doing any like nice blending, which is an option. If you wanted to make this look a little more realistic, you would glaze between these layers of French Mirage blue and white, or rather the French Mirage blue and the mix of French Mirage blue and white. And then we're going to move to just dead white. And this is, we're going to just on the, I guess, I have a hard time explaining exactly where you want to place these. On the most, the parts of the smoke that stand out the most, I guess focal points. It's really up to you exactly where you draw them, but I felt like the areas that stuck out the most are where I tried to put this white paint. Again, if you wanted to have a more realistic look, this is where it looks like the way I did it. If you wanted to emphasize it to look a little more real, you would blend between. You can also just save time and do what I did here on this model, on this specific one, and just dry brushed it. I just dry brushed white over French Mirage blue. Now there's a little bit of where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So towards the bottom, the source of the smoke, we're gonna glaze in some fiery looking colors. So we start with this red here. We glaze it in. That is very thinned down. In fact, this is probably too opaque still. So I'd thin it down even more. You're going to glaze this towards the bottom so you get a nice solid red. Then we're going to use Vallejo Scarlet. You could also use Wazdaka Red if you wanted to use Citadel paints. And again, within that red, we're going to glaze this reddish orange color towards the base, or what we think is the source of the smoke, which is some smoldering fire. Then we're going to move up to Vallejo Bright Orange. And same idea, within that previous layer of Scarlet, we're going to glaze in some orange, making sure we leave a little bit of that Scarlet still showing through. Sorry, this is a little out of focus. The idea is that we're building a gradient up from red to yellow. Speaking of yellow, we're going to move on to sun yellow, or any warm yellow will do. You don't want to do like a cold ice yellow. You want a nice warm yellow. And same idea. We're going to glaze in towards the source. This should be a very small amount, the smallest amount, right? This should be the brightest but smallest bit of flame. And then just for fun, I add in a couple of dots to be like represent like embers. Again, this is kind of a cartoony smoke. So I felt like this was appropriate. You probably wouldn't do that for a more realistic look. But the shape of the model makes it look very cartoony. So anyway, let's move on to metallics. Now, don't use Citadel lead belcher air if you have access to regular lead belcher, because it's very thin. I ended up having to do, I think, 3 or 4 coats. So if you have a regular lead belcher, just use that. Or any dark gray will do. I'm going to hit everything that I want to be metallic. In this case, I do their swords, I do the doors, the mines, and of course, this guy's little metallic parrot bird, which is super cool. And then you're going to move on to Citadel Rune Fang Steel or any bright steel. And you're going to do a little bit of highlighting. Now, what I chose to highlight is I just chose pieces of metallic that I felt like stuck out the most, and the areas that had topward facing surfaces, right? So this has a bit of a round Vox looking thing, speaker thing. So I just hit the top and the part of the grill that stuck out the most. Now we're gonna hit these with a shade, Agrax Earth Shade, which is a brown, and we're gonna thin it down to be pretty thin. You can see here it's quite thin. Try not to let this pool on any flat surfaces especially. Make sure you get in those deep crevices like his little metallic beard here. That's where you want it to pool the heaviest. They're gonna move on to the glassware like he has on his little helmet. We start with a black base coat, but then we're gonna glaze in Citadel Calidor Sky, which is a medium blue, I guess. It's not dark blue, but like a medium blue. You're gonna glaze this up over a couple of layers. And if you feel like you didn't get a smooth transition, you can return to whatever black you used and glaze in between these areas of black and blue. Try to end your brush strokes in areas that you want to be the most blue. That's because that's where the paint is gonna get deposited the most. There's actually quite a lot of glass on here. There's also one on the auto engine. There's a door on the dock that has it. So you're gonna be doing quite a bit of this. And then you're gonna move on to Techless Blue, and the same idea. You're towards the area you want to be the brightest, in this case at the bottom of this, I guess, diving mask. Diving helmet, excuse me. Is gonna be this lighter blue. And then I grabbed in my case, Vallejo Dead White, but any pure white will do. And I thinned it down quite a lot, so that I'm building up this like specular highlight, right? So this is actually not fully white. And then within this like kind of half transparent white dot, I put a pure, like fully opaque white dot. It's actually a little off center. I ended up having to go back and fix it a little bit, but and once you've got that in place, you can go back to that thinned down white and kind of build this crescent around the top, the area that surrounds the specular highlight, which should look something like that. Now we're gonna move on to oil washes, which is something you've probably noticed. You're probably wondering, why don't my black and tans look like his? That's because I didn't show you how to do oil washes yet, which is gonna be something you wanna do towards the end. This is Abtalong Dark Brick Red, a tip I picked up from Cult of Paint, who you should check out. You're gonna thin this down with mineral spirits or white spirits or whatever you have in your area. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna paint this over the black, quote unquote, black armored areas, which are actually quite blue because of the incubi darkness. And I know it looks kind of intense now, but once it dries, it won't be nearly as bright. So just apply this over any areas that you want to have black armor. And what's great about this oil paints is that if you screw up, you can just return later with a sponge and dip it in some mineral spirits. You can just wipe it away. It's actually quite forgiving. As for the tan elements, the tan armor, specifically the armor, not the pants or anything, we're going to use this Burnt Umber by Winsor & Newton. Again, thinned down in a similar manner. When it came to the dock, I didn't go quite as heavy on the wash, but on this Aether Khemist balloon pack, I went much heavier. I ended up doing the entire thing just to show you the differences between the two. And actually to show how forgiving it can be, right? So remember how dirty that looks and then what it looks like at the end. So Winsor & Newton Burnt Sienna, we're also going to put this over the metallic areas. The metallics are getting a double wash. Aren't they lucky? This is much thinner than the other ones. It's quite thin, you can see. It's just going to give a bit of a rusty tinge. Again, it looks much more intense when it goes on, but once it's dried, it's much more subtle. And it gives you this nice matte finish, which I think is great for weathered looking metals. I'm also going to apply this to the quite bright Aether Khemist's helmet, but I don't do an entire wash. I just dab it in a couple of areas, as you can see here, right? And then I hit it on his beard. I make sure to get in all these like deep crevices, but I'm not soaking the whole thing. And I also just hit these little ridges here, but not the entirety of the helmet. If you've never used oil washes, I highly encourage it. Like I said, they're very forgiving, and I think they look great, especially if you want a more of a weathered look as opposed to a very clean look. I was always kind of afraid of them, but then I gave them a try. It is kind of annoying, you have to get mineral spirits or white spirit sands or whatever. But it's definitely worth a try. So if you're looking for a sign, here's your sign. I'm telling you, try oil washes. You can also try enamel washes. Enamel washes are probably a nice, I don't want to say they're middle ground because they're basically, they work just like oil paints. They just dry a lot faster in my case, and from my experience, that's not always true. All right, so this is what I meant by how forgiving they are. So you can see how dirty orange that was. And with just a couple of swipes of this makeup brush with a little bit of mineral spirits on it, look at that. Now that reddish paint is only in the crevices. Super easy. That took seconds to fix. Which is something you can't do with acrylic paints. All right, as for basing, now you notice we painted these models separately because painting them on a base would have been a pain in the butt. So what I've done here is I've just marked out the area where I'm gonna have to glue later. You only really need to do this on the dock because it's such a massive model with kind of a weirdly shaped smoke. I'm using, I think Vallejo diorama sand. It doesn't really matter specifics because it's all gonna end up getting covered anyway. Once that's dried, I went ahead and added some tufts. Now something you can't quite see is I've built some ridges using this terrain paste. Then you're gonna grab a thinned down white house glue, Elmer's glue in this case. It's thinned down with just water, and you're going to apply a thin layer of this over the entirety of the base, and then just dip it in some sand. It's, you know, nothing fancy here. You're gonna have some of this, the texture base showing through, but this gives it a little bit of more texture, I guess. Definitely a taste thing. Some people don't like the way this looks. I personally do. But as you can see, I have these ridges here, right? And so we're going to take advantage of those ridges, and we're going to use Skeleton Horde, and we're going to do another directional spray. This time, you know, perpendicular to the ridges, right? And we're also going to spray from a low angle. That way, we only catch the back of these ridges, which gives us a pretty cool, like, shaded look. And I'll show you what I mean. Right, you can see there how like the backs of the ridges are dark, but if you turn the model around, it's quite bright. So you get this nice like shadowed look, which I think looks good. Right, anyway, once you're done with that, you're done, and that should leave you with something like this. I had a lot of fun painting these. These models are great to put together. I didn't really talk about that. Very easy to sub-assemble. Very the opposite of fragile, which is something I've been used to putting together Soulblight stuff. So these are a nice change of pace. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure you give a like, subscribe, all that stuff. And if you want to see these on the table, I should be playing them very soon. And I'm very excited for the rules. They look quite fun. I think that's everything. Hope you enjoyed. See you again next time. Bye-bye.